Close your eyes and let your mind wander to a lost era, long before mankind reached the stars, before the age of chaos, before the Imperium of mankind was born in flames. Earth, or Terra, was just another world, engulfed in primitive wars and the struggle for survival. Humanity was fragile, disjointed, and completely blind to the terrible dangers lurking in the darkness of space. But even in that dawning moment, a threat was growing from the other side of the veil of reality, from the dimension known as the warp. The warp was more than a mere passage for spaceships. It was a realm of pure psychic energy, a place where all emotions took on physical form, and hungry ghosts devoured the souls of the living. And humanity, with its ever-growing psychic potential, was becoming a tasty morsel. The Chaos Gods, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, smelt the rise of humanity, and they began to crave its destruction. The psychic power latent within humanity would fuel their wars and their domination of the physical universe. And it was in that dark hour, over 10,000 years before the birth of the Empire, that the Emperor was born. He was not born by accident, nor by mere chance. His birth was the culmination of a great and ancient ritual, a plan woven from the very threads of time itself, a convergence of primal forces and desperate wills, united in a single purpose. His origins date back to the dawn of humanity, when Terra was young and wild, when humanity was still struggling to find its place in a dangerous and cruel world. He is the beacon of hope, purposely created to shield humanity from the constant threat of the warp. Long before humanity understood the stars or the mysteries of the warp, there existed a handful of individuals who could see beyond the veil of reality. They were the Magi, the first psychics. Their connection to the warp allowed them to sense the energy flows of the universe. They were scattered across early Terra, among nomadic tribes and ancient civilizations, often revered as sages or prophets. Their abilities were not mutations or genetic accidents. Instead, they drew their power from the primal flows of life and death, from the natural energies of all things. With their gifts, they healed the sick, guided the people, and warded off spiritual threats. But then, the nature of the warp began to change. A once relatively neutral dimension began to darken with the birth of new races of consciousness. Intense emotions such as rage, despair, lust, and ambition began to shape the beings within the warp. These malevolent forces, later known as the Chaos Gods, consumed the psychic emanations of conscious beings. And humanity, with its rising psychic potential, became an easy prey. As the Chaos Gods grew in power, they sought to influence the physical universe, whispering into the minds of mortals, sowing seeds of madness, corruption, and ambition. The mages, who had once freely drawn power from the warp, now found their abilities threatened. Each time they died, and their souls returned to the warp, they faced the risk of being consumed or distorted by dark entities. The once peaceful cycle of rebirth has become a perilous journey through a warp seething with danger. The mages realize the all-encompassing threat they face. Each generation grows weaker, their connection to the warp more perilous. Fewer mages are reborn, and those who return are diminished in power or broken in mind by the contamination. In their visions, the mages see what the future will look like if the chaos gods are left to flourish. Humanity will be destroyed, enslaved by its own psychic potential, reduced to a resource for the dark forces to exploit. It is no longer a matter of mages' survival, but of the fate of all humanity. Faced with the prospect of extinction, mages have gathered in secret from across Terra. Their tribes and civilizations may be different, but they share a common understanding of the threat. The only way to protect humanity was to create an entity of such great power and purity that it could shield humanity from the clutches of chaos. A being that could lead and protect the species, both in the physical and the invisible realms. After decades of deliberation, they devised a desperate plan. They would sacrifice their physical bodies and merge their spiritual selves into a single immortal entity. This entity would be born with the combined wisdom and power of all mages, immune to the ravages of the warp, and capable of leading humanity into a future free from the corruption of chaos. It was a ritual that required the death of every mage on Terra, a final and irreversible act. But they believed it was the only way. The ritual took place at a secret location. Thousands of mages gathered, united in common purpose. On the physical plane, they formed a great circle, chanting ancient mantras, drawing power from the earth and the stars. In the warp, their souls began to merge as one, merging into a single brilliant point of light. The chaos gods, sensing the birth of something that would challenge their rule, rushed forward to stop it. But the mages were prepared. They had woven their ritual with layers of protection, drawing on the natural energies of the universe to shield themselves. When the ritual reached its climax, the mages' combined souls merged into a single, colossal spiritual entity. In that moment, the Emperor of Mankind was born. His birth was not a dramatic event in the eyes of the world. There were no disasters or signs in the skies. The tribes and empires of Terra continued their wars and struggles, unaware of the great change that had just occurred. But deep within the warp, the Chaos Gods cowered. For the first time, they sensed a real threat, something that could match their power, something immune to their influence. The Emperor did not emerge fully formed in golden armor, nor did he immediately conquer the world. Instead, he was born as a mortal, living among humanity in secret. He inherited the knowledge, wisdom, and combined power of the mages, but he knew that his true purpose would take millennia to reveal itself. Humanity was not yet ready for his leadership. The race needed to grow, evolve, endure hardships that would forge them into a race capable of resisting the temptation of chaos. In his early years, the Emperor lived among the people of ancient Terra, moving from tribe to tribe, observing and learning. He witnessed the birth of civilizations and the fall of empires, always remaining hidden in the shadows. His immense psychic power allowed him to subtly influence events, guiding humanity without revealing his true nature. He sowed the seeds of knowledge, spurring the development of agriculture, language, and science. For millennia, the Emperor walked the earth as a silent observer. His body was no different from a mortal, but his mind was a vast ocean of knowledge and spiritual power, stretching across time and space. He did not need to sleep, nor did he age like others. But instead of dominating or controlling, the Emperor chose to learn. He understood that his time would come, but humanity would need to develop its own power before it could accept the unity he would one day bring. Throughout human history, the Emperor took on many different identities. He became part of every culture, every civilization, slipping into the role of warrior, philosopher, craftsman, or physician when needed. In the ancient empires of Mesopotamia, he was a humble chronicler, chronicling the rise of the first cities of mankind. When the pharaohs of Egypt built the mighty pyramids, he walked among them as a priest, whispering words of wisdom into the ears of the kings. He fought alongside warriors in the battles that shaped the future of empires. The Emperor's influence is subtle. His hand is gentle on the wheel of history, preferring to sow the seeds of progress rather than impose his will on the world. He understands that human nature requires conflict and challenge to grow. Too much intervention will stunt humanity's growth. Too little, and they will fall into barbarism and chaos. He has seen countless civilizations rise and fall, understanding that even the darkest moments in human history are necessary steps toward the greater unity he envisions. In the dark corners of the world, he alone can perceive the creeping influence of the warp, the slow infiltration of the dark forces whispering into the minds of rulers and tyrants. The Chaos Gods, sensing the Emperor's presence, seek to undermine his work, tempting men with power, greed, and ambition. But the Emperor is ever vigilant. On countless occasions, he intervenes to prevent these forces from gaining a foothold in the physical world. The Emperor's vision for humanity is not just survival, but evolution. He sees the potential within the species to become something far greater, a force capable of mastering both the physical and spiritual realms. His role was to lead humanity through these trials, ensuring that they learned from their mistakes and grew stronger with each passing century. The Emperor's patience was limitless, but even his vigilance could not delay the inevitable forever. The Age of Chaos, a time of unimaginable terror and darkness, gripped the galaxy. Raging warp storms swept across the stars, cutting off humanity's colonies from one another. On Terra itself, the birthplace of humanity, the barbarian warriors fought for supremacy. Terra had become a wasteland of toxic skies and blood-stained soil, where cruelty and ambition reigned. At this moment, after millennia of subtly observing and guiding humanity, he chose to step out of the shadows and reveal himself fully. His time had come. When he emerged, he did not appear as a distant god, but as a man of unparalleled power and vision. His golden armor gleamed with the light of hope, a stark contrast to the shattered and bleak world that surrounded him. The barbarian warriors, who had ruled with an iron fist and brute strength, found themselves utterly powerless before the Emperor. He marched with his thunder warriors across the world, razing the barbarian strongholds one by one. The world burned in blood and fire, but with each victory, Terra moved closer to unification. With Terra united, he turned his gaze to the stars. He knew that Terra was only the beginning. Humanity had spread across the galaxy before the Age of Chaos, but now those colonies lay in ruins. To reunite them under a single banner, to restore the light of humanity across the stars. This was the Emperor's true goal. And so the Great Crusade began. But he knew he could not do it alone. He needed generals, beings of immense power, who could not only lead armies, but also inspire entire worlds to embrace his vision. And so the Primarch Project was born. The Emperor, a master of genetic science, sought to create beings in his own image. 20 sons, each embodying a fragment of his great power, intellect, and will. They would lead his Space Marine legions, the Atomic Warriors. However, before the Primarchs could be completed, disaster struck. The forces of chaos, sensing the Emperor's plans, moved to stop him. In a desperate attempt to stop his work, they infiltrated the Emperor's gene labs and scattered the fledgling Primarchs across the galaxy, hurling them to distant worlds where they would grow in isolation. Despite his losses, the Emperor pressed forward. He created the Space Marine Legions, genetically enhanced warriors based on the Primarch's genes. With the legions at his command, the Emperor began to reclaim his lost sons. One by one, the Emperor found them, and with each Primarch returned to his side, the strength of the Empire grew. They became the core of the Emperor's war effort, leading the Great Crusade with a relentless drive towards victory. As the Great Crusade unfolded, the Emperor's mind was always set on a future beyond the current battles. His vision for mankind was greater than survival or unity. It was a future in which mankind would transcend all limits, rise above the dangers of the warp and the dark gods that lurked within. At the heart of the Emperor's ultimate plan was the belief that mankind was destined for ascension. He would lead mankind to a future where they no longer needed to rely on the warp for movement or energy. A future where the influence of chaos would be stifled to insignificance. To do this, he must first completely sever mankind from the gods. The emperor developed a philosophical doctrine that would form the foundation of his empire. Imperial truth. It was the belief that there were no gods, no supernatural powers, only science, reason, and the natural laws of the universe. It was a lie, of course. The emperor himself knew better than anyone that the gods existed and that the warp was real. But he also knew that belief in such entities only made them stronger. The chaos gods fed on worship, on fear, denying their existence, stamping out religion and superstition was the way to starve the gods. While imperial truth served as a philosophical foundation, it was not enough. The warp, for all its dangers, was still a necessary tool for space travel. The emperor envisioned a future where mankind could travel between the stars without ever touching the warp. This vision led to one of the emperor's most ambitious and secretive projects, Project Webway. The Webway was an ancient network of tunnels that existed between dimensions, created by the Eldar long before the rise of mankind. Unlike the warp, the Webway was stable. A labyrinth of passages that allowed instantaneous travel across the galaxy without the dangers of the warp. The Emperor, with his vast knowledge of both science and the warp, saw in the Webway the key to mankind's independence from chaos. If he could unlock the secrets of the Webway and create a new path for humanity through it, the Empire would no longer need to use the warp to travel. The Chaos Gods would be cut off from mankind, their power starved, their influence reduced to a distant whisper. The construction of the Webway Gate beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra was the most closely guarded secret of his reign. Even his Primarchs knew little of the true extent of the project. The Emperor entrusted this task to his Mechanicum allies and his most loyal guardians, who worked day and night to realize his vision. Deep beneath Terra's surface, the Emperor himself worked tirelessly, using his immense psychic power to guide the construction and ensure the stability of the Webway. The Emperor always knew that the greatest threat to his vision would not come from without, but from within. For all his power, for all his foresight, he could not completely shield the hearts and minds of his beloved Primarchs from the warp's debilitating whispers. Yet, despite all the dangers, the Emperor never foresaw the scale of the betrayal that was about to come, and that it would come from his most trusted and beloved son, Horus Lupercal. Supreme Commander of the Empire, was the Emperor's chosen heir. He had been entrusted with command of the Great Crusade in his father's absence. But the seeds of doubt had taken root. Horus, like many Primarchs, struggled with the emperor's aloofness. The emperor had offered little explanation for his withdrawal from the front lines of the Great Crusade, and Horus, burdened by the immense responsibility of his new role, felt abandoned. The forces of chaos, always preying on weakness, saw their opportunity. They whispered into Horus's mind, feeding his insecurities, fueling his ambitions. They showed him visions of the future, a future where the emperor would cast aside his sons, where Horus and his brothers were mere instruments for the emperor's ascension to godhood. They convinced him that the emperor was a hypocrite, preaching imperial truth while secretly aspiring to be a god himself. It was a lie, but Horus believed it. And once he accepted the whispers of chaos, there was no turning back. Horus fell, seduced by the power and promise of the ruinous powers. He became their champion, and in his betrayal, he brought about the destruction of the empire. One by one, he turned his fellow Primarchs against the emperor, corrupting some of the most loyal and powerful legions. What began as discontent and suspicion grew into open rebellion. Horus, the emperor's favored son, now became his greatest enemy. The galaxy was torn apart by civil war. The Horus Heresy, as it was called, shattered the dream of the empire. Horus's betrayal culminated in an attack on the very heart of the empire, Terra. Horus, now completely corrupted by chaos, led his rebel legions to the imperial palace gates. The emperor, who had been working tirelessly on the Webway project, was forced to abandon his work and prepare for the final battle. He knew that if Terra fell, if Horus succeeded in his coup, then humanity would perish. The siege of Terra was the most devastating conflict in human history. As the walls of the imperial palace began to crumble under the relentless assault, Horus, filled with the dark power of chaos, made a bold and fateful move. He lowered the shields of the flagship, challenging the emperor to face him directly. The emperor, seeing that the time had come, knew he had no choice. Escorted by a handful of his most trusted warriors, the emperor teleported onto Horus's flagship. There, amid the wreckage of a shattered starship, father and son met for the last time. Horus had become unrecognizable, no longer the noble, charismatic supreme commander the emperor had known. He was now a creature of the warp, his soul warped by the influence of the chaos gods. The final confrontation between father and son was brutal and swift. Horus, empowered by the dark gods, struck with a fury that even the emperor found difficult to contain. During the fight, Sanguinius, the angelic Primarch who had surrendered to Horus, was slain. His death sent a wave of grief through the emperor, but Sanguinius's loss also strengthened his resolve. Horus struck the emperor with a blow that should have killed him, and for a moment the emperor faltered. But in that moment, the emperor saw the truth. Horus was beyond saving. The son he had loved was no more, consumed by chaos. The emperor unleashed his full power in a single devastating act of will. He obliterated Horus, erasing his existence from the warp and the material world. But the price was high. The Emperor's body was shattered, destroyed beyond repair. Gravely wounded, the Emperor was returned to Terra, where he was placed on the Golden Throne, a life support device that would keep his body alive, but only just. His physical form was destroyed, his dream shattered. The Empire was saved, but at a terrible price. Now, the Emperor of mankind sits motionless upon the Golden Throne. His body, ravaged beyond repair by the battle with Horus, is a shattered shell, kept alive only by the mysterious technologies of the throne itself. The being who once marched across the stars, leading the legions of mankind, is now little more than a walking corpse. But though his body is broken, his mind endures. The Emperor, even in his near-dead state, continues to maintain his will to the Empire, keeping the darkness at bay. The Golden Throne sustains his body, but it is his will that sustains the Empire. His mind is a fortress in the warp, his spiritual light burning across the galaxy, holding back the waves of chaos that would otherwise engulf mankind. This is his long watch, a never-ending struggle, where every moment is spent fighting against the forces that seek to weaken and destroy his empire. He maintains the Astronomicon, a spiritual beacon of unimaginable power that stretches across the galaxy, guiding the ships of the Empire through the treacherous waves of the warp. Without it, warp travel would be impossible, and the Empire would fragment. The price of this eternal vigilance is high. Thousands of psychics are sacrificed every day to the throne, their life force consumed to power the beacon. But even this is not enough. The Emperor's existence is a constant battle, a struggle to maintain the light that binds humanity while his body slowly decays into dust. To billions of souls across the Empire, the Emperor is worshipped as a god. But the terrible truth is, the Emperor is not a god, but a man dying bit by bit. And the irony is sweet, for he never wanted to be worshipped. He fought to eradicate the very idea of gods. But in his absence, the Empire turned him into the very thing he sought to destroy. Though imprisoned on the Golden Throne, the Emperor's influence still shapes the destiny of humanity. His spiritual presence, vast and unforgiving, reaches far beyond his broken body. His spirit is locked in eternal vigilance, constantly battling the demons and dark gods who seek to weaken and destroy mankind. The Emperor's dream of a unified galaxy, free from the taint of chaos, lives on in the hearts of his most loyal followers. The Imperium of mankind, the colossal empire that spans the entire galaxy, stands as the last testament to the Emperor's enduring influence. It is a brutal dictatorship, besieged on all sides, but it survives. It is the last bastion against the forces that would see humanity consumed in darkness. And in that, at least, the Emperor's legacy remains true. His Imperium is humanity's only hope in a galaxy filled with horrors. The light of the Astronomicon still guides the ships of humanity through the warp. The Golden Throne still exists, and the Emperor still watches. His long vigil continues, his spirit unbroken, preparing for the final battle that will decide the fate of all. His dream is not lost, and as long as the Emperor exists, there is a chance, however faint, that his vision for humanity's future can be realized. And know that even in the darkest reaches of the galaxy, a light still fights, a will still protects, an Emperor still watches.